and welcome back to another exciting Blender tutorial. Here we are in our Hunter's Den. We're almost done with our scene. It's time to bring things over into Unreal. Let's get started. Now we need to start talking about how we're going to take this into Unreal. Now, there are a lot of topics that this simple process breaches. There's a lot of different things that this crosses over, and there's sort of different levels of complexity that we can use in approaching something like this. And I'm going to approach this with the simplest approach first as a demonstration to explain some stuff. Now, what I recommend you're doing right now is I recommend you go ahead and save your project file with a new name. So you've got a new version of this project so that if we mess anything up in this one or when you're experimenting with it, you're not stressed about losing what you've made so far. Okay, so just give yourself a bit of breathing room. Then what we're also going to do is I'm going to bring all this stuff over into Unreal to show you something, but I don't want you to do that just yet. Don't follow along exactly with me. Just watch it first and let's talk about these ideas and then go back and then try it, okay, on your own. I don't know if you follow along with me when you make your stuff. Chances are if it's anything like the last few, it'd be impossible to because I'm cutting so much out and I'm moving so quickly. Anyway, so just watch it and let's absorb what we're talking about, these concepts. If these are new concepts to you, they're going to be mind-blowing. So you just gotta pace yourself. Okay, so let's jump in and get started with this. All right. Now, right now, so I've got my scene set to simplify so that it runs a bit quicker. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off so we can see all of our geometry, all of our mesh and stuff. Okay. Now, typically speaking, everything here, even our modifiers and stuff, like the array modifier we have on the floor, remember we've got this bevel modifier and two array modifiers to make this floor object. We can leave all this as is. When we export it as an FBX, it's going to bake down all these modifiers and turn everything into mesh. Same with our splines. So all of our wires and stuff, it's going to bake those down to mesh. And when we export to FBX, there's not a lot that we need to do necessarily. Now, even the particle systems are going to work. So the particle systems are going to bake, like our roof pipes and stuff. We can actually leave those as is, and they're going to bake down and export. Anyways, so that's really helpful. There's only one thing in our scene that will cause a crash if you try and do an FBX export, and that is our little brackets. Now, if you remember our brackets, we set them up so that they were parented to the vertex within the spline so that we could easily position them, which is a great little technique. But this kind of parenting is going to just make the machine explode. So this is the only step we need to do to really kind of clean up first. So the easiest way to get rid of a bunch of things or to unparent a bunch of things is if they, like in our case, they've all got the same name, right? They're all called brackets. So we just go up here into the search tab and we just search for a bracket. You can see already they're all show up. I'll just write out the full name. Now in this, in our outliner, I can just hit A to select all. And then over here in the main window, it's okay that our wires are selected. That doesn't matter. I'll zoom out so we can see all of them at once to make sure nothing bad happens. And all we're going to do is hit Alt-P, and that's the hotkey for clearing a parent. You can also get that in your F3 menu. You can type F3 and type in clear parent to find it. And we're going to click this one, clear and keep transformation, because if we clear the parent, because it's parented to a vertex, it's actually going to change its position because its position is like dependent upon where that vertex is. It's a bit complicated, but if you just do clear and keep transformation, whenever you clear a parent, it'll keep whatever transformation it's inherited from the parent. Okay, so if I click that, you can see nothing happen, which is good. It's what we want. If something has happened, of course, these are no longer parented to the wires. So you can see they're all separated. So that's exactly what we were after. We can clear that out. And so now if I open up this group, you see all the brackets are now on their own and then all the wires are separate. So easy times. Now that's the only thing that we need to worry about, okay? All right, now let's bring this into Unreal. I'm not gonna touch anything. I'm not gonna touch materials. I'm not gonna combine objects. I just wanna show you what happens, okay? So I'm going to close down my collections and I'm going to select, I'll select, I'll just select my hollow table just to clear whatever I had selected before. And I'm going to hit select objects on this collection. I'll skip my lights and camera because we're not going to bring those in. I'll select objects for the light fixtures, pipes, wall wires, and room. Bingo. Okay, so we've got everything selected now. We're not going to bring in our panel generator naturally or our base wire or our reference objects, and we're not going to bring in our cameras and lights and stuff, okay? So we're going to leave those unselected. But everything else, even the particle systems, we're going to just bring it over, okay? So I'm going to go up here to File, Export, FBX, and now I just want to name name this thing. Let's see. I'm going to call this den export full. I'll just give it a weird, wacky name. And in our settings, just like last time, we can actually leave everything. We just click on selected objects only. So it's just going to bring over the ones we selected. We can leave this stuff because we haven't selected any cameras and stuff. It doesn't really matter, but just keep that ticked. Scale. Now, I have actually recently learned that Blender and Unreal actually behave a lot better when it comes to scale than maybe they have in the past. So in my experience with Blender, it's always been something you've had to really kind of be careful with the scale and also with the origin of objects when bringing them over. But I've recently heard that actually they play a lot nicer together, and that this whole transform scale thing and applying unit is actually going to fix up any kind of scale discrepancies. I might be wrong about that, but that's just something I've heard. I need to do a bit more research on it, but still doing what I've showed you to do with like changing your scale in Blender to match the Unreal settings. That's fine. That's going to cause any problems. That's actually probably the safest thing to do. But if this is actually then applying that scale and transforming it into what it needs to be, then maybe it's okay anyways, if you do it just standard. But I tend to still do it this way because I just know that it's going to work correctly. Geometry, we've got, let's see, I've set my face smoothing to be the thing. And the geometry, I'm just going to set this to smoothing to be face because I've done smooth shading on a lot of my objects. And bake animation, I'm just going to turn that off because we don't want to actually bring over any of our animation. We do have animation in our materials, remember? So I'm going to untick this so it'll take forever to export if we do, and we can't actually use that stuff anyway. So let's just untick bake animation. All right, so that's it. So now we just hit export, and it'll take a little bit of time. Just give it a minute because there's a lot of objects. My computer fans are revving up. That's kind of your only clue. There's no progress bar or anything. The only thing you can, when you know it's done, if you click in your timeline, and if it moves relatively quickly, then you know, okay, it's not thinking about how to do it anymore. So we should be good to go. Also, it'll appear in your Finder. All right, now I'm gonna switch over to Unreal. Now, if you remember last time with our project, this is the base one that opens up when you open up your project, and we want to be using our, motion controller map. Okay, so we can open up the motion controller map. Now, we have all that stuff that we set up last time. I've just started a fresh project because I've kind of messed around with it so much. It's a bit broken, but that's all right because we're just going to delete everything out of this, okay? But before we delete everything out, let's go ahead and just clean up things a little bit. I want to rename this, instead of motion controller map, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go to rename, and I'm going to call this Bounty Hunter Den. And I'll just underscore map. There are specific naming conventions that are kind of standard for Unreal, and what I'm doing is not those naming conventions. So, yeah, you'll notice there's a few things I do in Unreal that aren't necessarily conventional. All right, so got my map. We don't need these other ones, okay? So we can actually just go ahead and delete all this stuff, and that'll just clean up our scene a little bit. And then what we can do as well, we can go up to Settings, Project Settings, and right here where it says all settings, just click on that and type in starter. Just get up this editor startup map, and we can select Bounty Hunter Den map. And that means that whenever we open our project, it's going to open up this map directly for us. So that's helpful. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to just delete everything out of this scene, except for the only thing I want to keep is my VR pawn. Okay, because I want to keep all that control functionality that they've got in there. You don't even technically need this. You just have like a straight up pawn, and then with VR turned on in your scene, then it's literally you can just walk around, and that's as far as you can go. Within your tracking volume, without any controls. That's how that behaves. But we'll keep this here because it's kind of nice having those controls. Also, too, with the lighting, the scene, these little things here, these are great. Like if you're having a daytime scene and stuff, feel free to leave these in here because it kind of makes sense to keep your skylight and your sky sphere blueprint and your light source. The light mass importance volume, this deals with global illumination and calculating that. And the post-process volume is actually something for just changing the compositing. So you can actually change like the exposure like we were doing in Blender, or add color effects or things like bloom, or change like any of your standard graphic settings with post-process volume. So that's why those are in there. They're kind of the standard includes. And then the skylight and the sky sphere blueprint. This is actually what's generating this sky and what's lighting our scene from the sky. But in our scene, we don't need any of that stuff because we just have a black world that we're in and we just want to light it with our lights. So I'm going to get rid of all this, including the light mass important volume. We're not going to actually worry about the global illumination stuff. So I'll just hit delete, yes to all, delete that folder. I'm going to delete the arena geometry, cubes, navigation, all this, box brush, just get rid of everything. All right, cool. So now we have an empty scene. The only thing we've got in here is our VR pawn. Okay, that's it. Okay, now we've got some. There's already some content directories set up. I just want to give you a quick warning. Don't treat this like Windows Explorer or Finder on a Mac. You can't just like drag and drop folders and just move stuff around willy nilly. It's a little more hard coded, if you know what I mean. Like if you were to drag stuff into other folders, you can just mess up dependencies and you can mess up linking stuff. All right, so within our little folder here with our bounding hunters down, I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this assets. And I'm going to open it up, and in here is where I'm going to just import all of my Blender stuff. So I'm going to right click in here and go import. Okay, so I've selected my DIN full export and immediately get this box that pops up. And we're going to just go with all the standard settings. We're not going to change anything at all. So just click import all. Takes a little bit of time because we've got a ton of objects. Okay, and we're all done. And here we are, tons of warnings. Now, you're going to get warnings all the time. None of these mean that your project's broken or it's not going to work. They're just warnings. So they're saying, look, you could do this a little bit better. All right. Getting all that stuff just right and getting your imports to work perfectly it's sort of an advanced topic beyond the scope of what we're doing here. All right. So as you can see, we've got everything. It's all come in. It's brought in like every single little button, like that we had on our floor and, on our objects and stuff. Like this is like insane how much stuff we've got in our scene when you break it down like this. And then right here at the end are all of our materials. I'm just going to shift select all the geometry. I'm going to drag it in and let go. I'm going to give Unreal a minute to actually process the fact that we dragged 1,000 objects into our scene. And there they all are. Now I had to wait about 5 minutes for all this to appear. So 5 to 10 minutes, don't panic. It's actually thinking about a lot of things in the background. So just let it be frozen for a little while. Don't try and escape quit out of it. Anyways, so here they all are in my hierarchy. And you can see there's just a ton of them. Now with everything still selected in my location, I'm just going to zero out my location. Okay, so now I've got everything in place. You can see there it all is. Now we can't see any of it, of course, because it's so dark in here. So I'm going to throw some lights in our scene. Just get positioned. And I'll just go over here to my panels, select lights, and I'm just going to grab a point light. And I will put it in our scene, kind of bring it up here. And I might just hit Control W to duplicate. It's how you duplicate in Unreal, Control W. We'll make this one red, and I'll put it under the floor so we can get that same kind of look going on. We're not going to do our lighting here just yet, but I'm just demonstrating. So Control W. And oh no, I just Control W with all this stuff selected in that. Okay, so I just had to pause the recording. So 2 reasons. One, I accidentally hit Control W while my mouse was down here, so while everything was selected. So I literally duplicated all 1,400 objects in down here, and so then I had to delete them. That took about 10 minutes of waiting, and then it decided to autosave. And with this many objects, and you're seeing an autosave takes about 5 minutes. So you're starting to see why this may not be the best idea doing it this way. But I'm doing this for demonstration purposes, and I'm going to get to the demonstration. So, all right, so we got our scene. It's here. It's cool. It's looking good. We've got everything. Like the particles have worked. The pipes have worked. It's all come in. It all looks good. It all looks great. Now, you're going to run into this if you didn't know how to do it. If you're just messing around on your own and you kind of brought stuff in like this, you're going, oh, cool, look at these great shadows. Look at how awesome this looks on this thing. Whenever you're setting stuff up in Unreal, you can see up here we get this red text. Lighting needs to be rebuilt. Okay, so right now we've got this scene and we've got all of these static mesh objects. Now static mesh actors is what they're labeled as here. So everything here is just static mesh. That means that it's not animated. It's not going to move. Now these 3 things, static, stationary, movable, these 3 categories, they live on everything from your lights to your objects to everything. They're very important when it comes to rendering your image. Okay, each one of these has a very different approach. If you hover over your mouse, you can get an idea of what they're doing. And basically, what you're doing is you're telling the computer how to calculate things to save time, to save speed, and to optimize, okay? A static object, if it's not going to move, then that means, hey, I can, and you're telling Unreal, you can bake all the lighting for this. You can save that lighting information and then just reuse it because it's not going to move. But there's a big problem with that, okay? And it has to do with our scene and the way things are made. And I'll show you something that we haven't actually done, but you gotta check this out to see it. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on build lighting, okay? And I'm just gonna position my frame right over this. So now build lighting, you can get it up here. You can build lighting only, or you can just build the whole project. But I just go up and build lighting only. There's different quality settings. You can, preview build and to make it a little bit faster because it takes a little bit of time. It's got to export the scene. It's got to process. Down here, you get this exporting lighting data. You got to wait for this to get done. There's a few things in Unreal that actually involve a lot of waiting for little things like this to happen. So you get better at being efficient, learning when to do it, when not to worry about it. But hopefully this will begin to help you understand how it works. Okay, so we're building our lighting now, and it'll just take a little bit of time. When that's done, I'll pick up where we left off. Okay, it's finished. Great. And we've got a stack of errors, a stack of warnings. Not errors, just warnings. And we're getting this one warning over and over. Object has overlapping UVs. Light map UVs are overlapping by 50%. Please adjust content. Okay, what does this mean? You're about to find out. If I close this box, whoa, what happened to my amazing scene? Look at the horror. This is disgusting. Oh my gosh, what happened to this lighting? This whole place is completely ruined. Look at this. Look at this. Look at these buttons. Look at that. Ugh. What are we even doing with Unreal? Let's go to Unity. Forget this. Oh man. So yeah, this is not good, is it? I mean, it looks disgusting. Look at that. That's just like horrific. So what's going on here? Okay, you might be really confused by this. You might be going like, if you've never seen this before and you're just mucking around and you're trying to get stuff into Unreal and get it working, this is going to just drive you up a wall. Let me show you what's going to drive you more up a wall. You grab one of your point lights. So let's grab one of our lights down here on the floor and let's go, oh man, what happened? I'm just going to adjust my light. Suddenly, oh, hey, it's all back. Wait a minute. That's how I want it to look. Why does it not look like that? Okay, so let me explain. What is going on is let's focus on our little cabinet. So this thing is looking really terrible. And the reason was, in fact, it still looks pretty bad there. You can see, the only thing that's gotten better is our lighting. Oh, and you can see this text kind of printed in the shadows. This is also telling you that the lighting needs to be rebuilt. It kind of like prints text into the things to let you know. Okay, so why does this look so bad? This mesh is set to static. So what Unreal is trying to do is it's trying to take this mesh and it's trying to figure out the lighting and then it's trying to save it basically as an image file that it can apply to this like a texture. Okay, so I'm giving you this is just sort of the metaphor of what's going on. And if we open up this object, so over here in the outliner, you can actually open up the details for an individual object. So here we are, this is our cabinet. You can see it looks fine here, what's going on. We open up our UVs and we look at our UV channels. Okay, now we have a lot of overlapping UVs. So you can see all of our buttons here are laid out on top of each other like this. All the square buttons are on top of each other. The cabinet itself is like overlapping itself. What Unreal does is it tries to then take this and extrapolate it and turn it into what's called a light map. And a light map are basically all the UVs, but laid out separately and not covering each other. But it hasn't actually done it correctly because we've got so many overlapping UVs that it doesn't know what's what. And it's kind of all messy and crazy and all over the place. So then what it does is it calculates the lighting and then it tries to save the lighting to this file. Because sometimes in a UV, you want things to overlap, because you're going to have repeating patterns like all these red buttons. We just want one texture for all the red buttons. So it's good for us to have all of our UVs stacked up on top of each other for the red button. So we can just use one texture for that red button. It's going to be on all of them. But for a light map, it's different because lighting falls on every face a little bit differently. So every face needs to be separated out. You don't want to have any overlaps. If you have overlaps, you get weird double up black shadows and weird like wobbly bits. And well, basically this grossness is what you end up with. Not even bad UVs, just UVs laid out for texturing are not going to give you the same result as UVs for light maps. So building light maps and stuff, it's a whole nother topic. It's quite complex and there's a lot of things to it to get it just right. Unreal does generate its own and often they're good enough. So it's fine. You can actually just not worry about making light maps at the beginning and you can just unwrap your stuff in Blender well and for textures and whatever, and anything that you unwrap, you can bring over into Unreal and it's going to make a pretty good light map as long as there's no overlapping UVs. Okay, so how do we deal with this problem? Well, that's where these buttons come in. Now, every object in our scene right now is set to static. Now, if we select everything, again, if you're like really a pro in Unreal and you're watching this tutorial and you're probably screaming at the screen like, don't do it. What are you doing? Don't teach them to do this. But I can't hear you because I've recorded this in the past and you're just shouting at your computer and that's weird. So deal with it. All right, so my lights are set to stationary. Now, all of my geometry is also set to stationary. Okay, you can see we still get some text appearing here because we need to rebuild our lighting again for this new setup. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and rebuild with stationary selected. Okay, so we've baked the lighting again. You can see now our scene's really dark, but if I get close up to this object, you can see it's not quite as ugly as what it was before, but it's still not, it's not anything to write home about. So when things are stationary, you're telling you're telling Unreal basically, I'll just have it over to tell you here. So you're saying that it's not going to move. And what it does is it allows partially baked lighting and dynamic shadows for movable objects. So movable objects can still cast dynamic shadows if your lights are stationary. If your mesh is stationary, you're saying it's not going to move and it will kind of partially bake the lighting. If I select my point lights now, I'm going to select my two little lights and I'm going to switch them from stationary now. I'm going to move all the way up to movable. Now, movable is the slowest of the three. So these kind of moving up. So the static is super fast. If you've got really great light maps and they're really well made, then static is going to work great and you're going to be able to bake and you'll get this result, but everything's going to be saved basically. And it won't be having to render this real time. Stationary, it kind of renders it once and saves it, but you can see with if our lights were stationary as well, it's still trying to kind of bake in the scene in a way that's just not going to function with the way we've got things set up in our light maps. So again, no good light maps, stationary is not going to work for you. However, in this scenario, you can see I've moved my lights to movable. So now the lights are totally dynamic. We could animate these and move them in the scene now. It also means it's calculating the lighting every frame. Because our objects are stationary, that means that it's able to cache a little bit. So it's able to kind of like render the first frame of the scene more or less. And as long as these guys don't move, then they're not going to, it's not going to try and update that lighting. So that saves a little bit, but it's still, this is the slowest of all the different rendering types. You can mix and match. So like some of these objects in our scene, we could unwrap and have some static lighting on them. Maybe things that aren't as important and they're in the distance, definitely we want to get some static lighting on those because why dynamically light something that's far away? So again, that's more the minutia, the finer points of getting into Unreal and learning how to do stuff for real time. So this is going to work well enough for us and it's perfectly acceptable. It's just not the most optimized version, if that makes sense. Okay, so the next thing that's a big problem is we've got so many objects, like our autosaves take forever. It's really cumbersome to work with this many objects. We've got like, look at this, it's just insane. So, so the next thing that we need to do is we actually need to go back into Blender and combine a bunch of objects down. Now, let me just say, the reason I wanted to show this first was with our light maps, if you combine an object down, like let me show you this floor object, right? It's really big. If we were just to like break down the UVs of this whole thing and then bring it in for a light map, those light maps, each little face is going to be very tiny on that light map because this is such a big object. There's so many faces. So you're gonna have to use a really high resolution on your light map to make it even work. And that can be a problem, right? Because that can be really slow. The most efficient thing for Unreal, if you really want to go for efficiency, would be to actually get rid of our modifiers in Blender and just work on the tiny square in the corner. Unwrap that, get those UVs laid out so that you can make really clean light maps that don't have the faces too small on the light map itself. And then what you do is you bring that in and you would duplicate this object within Unreal as opposed to duplicating it over in Blender. So you could duplicate that object a bunch of times and it's going to create instances of that one object, but each one is going to be able to calculate the lighting without having a massive light map resolution. So that's how that kind of works, okay? So if light maps are important to you and you want to give it a go, I would recommend going in and figuring out, okay, with these wires, can I bring in all the wires separately? Is that acceptable? Can I unwrap each of these individually to get really clean light maps for them? Maybe can I put 4 of these together, merge them, and then have their UVs laid out side by side? You got to think about how to pack it so that you're taking advantage of your UV space and not having overlapping UVs and making sure Unreal can still work with it. Because the UVs that Unreal creates when you bring something in, they work. They totally work. You can make your custom ones, and that's even more advanced. But just straight out of the box, what it does is actually pretty efficient if you've got a clean enough UV to begin with that doesn't have any overlapping UVs. That's why you might not want to merge everything together. But for us, since we're going to be using dynamic lights and we're going to have everything set to stationary and not static, we're not going to be using light maps. For us, it's actually going to be better if we merge things down so that we've got a much more manageable scene and it's quicker and more efficient to run. Okay, now you can merge objects in Unreal itself, but we're not going to do that because we're just focusing on the Blender side of things, because it's fine to do it in there as well. You have more options if you do it in here because then you can unmerge them and you can actually instance stuff. But again, that's all more advanced. There's a lot of things you can do to get a more efficient, more optimized scene in Unreal. There's a lot to learn here. So this is the taster. This is just getting you started. Okay, so let's go back over into Blender. All right, so first thing to do is save a new project file. Okay, so don't use this one. We want to duplicate all this stuff and merge it down without messing up what we've already got. So I'll just show you quickly how to do that for a few of these things. So like with the splines for our wires, so if I go to our light fixture or even our wall wires, I'll do those. You can take your wires, and since they're spline objects, first thing you need to do to merge them is you have to convert them to mesh. Okay, you can't merge splines together. So we just want to hit F3, and with all the splines selected, you can click Convert, and convert to Mesh from Curve Metasurface. This is it. So we click that, and it just automatically turns all these guys into mesh. So now I could like jump into edit mode for one of these, and you're actually going to see it's got faces. Now I can select these. I can actually select all of these, so the brackets and the wires, and I can just hit J to join, or Control J, sorry. And now it joins them all into one mesh object. So there you go. Wire 407 is what it's called. We can just call this wall wires. Okay, you can do the same for these guys, convert them and combine them down. Now for things that aren't splines and it's just straight mesh, you can just, merge them. So we could apply our array modifier and stuff for our floor. We could merge in all of our door blades. So I'm just going to merge a bunch of different things, and then I'll then show you how to do the particles. Okay, now before you merge down your pipes down on the floor, remember that the pipes are being used by this particle collection up here. So it's okay to convert them. So we can go and convert them to mesh because we're going to do that up here anyways. So I'm just going to hit F3 and type in convert to mesh. But now these guys are going to be mesh as well up here. Okay, that's all right. What I don't want to do is merge all these just yet. So I click on my room object, which is emitting this particle system. And all I need to do is go to my ridge and click convert. And that's going to turn all these into individual mesh objects. Then I need to hit F3, make single user, so that they're not connected to my floor pipes. And I'm going to go selected objects. I'm going to open up the little box and make sure object and object data are ticked. And now we are good to go. I'm going to click on my room, and I'm going to get rid of my particle system from the room. And now you can see all these guys are still up here. And now I'm going to go ahead and merge all of my roof pipes. As you can see, we've got an absolute, truckload of them. So I'll just select the first one, go all the way down, and select the last one, and hit Control J, and now they're all joined up. Nice and easy. There we go. Now you can do the same thing for the floor ones. You can just select the group and hit Control J. And now we've got floor pipes and our roof pipes. And yeah, and I'm almost done. I'll do the same for the cylinders. Each of these guys have a particle system. So I'm going to bake them all out and then make them single users and combine them with the individual objects. And then I'm going to combine the whole light fixture system together along with the wires. Okay, so I've merged everything down. You can see now I just have one object for my base floor. I've got my door blade object, my door frame, my door hallway thing. I've got my floor runners at the top and at the bottom I've merged down. I've got my single grate floor. I put all my panels into one object and all my pipes as a mesh object. And then I've got my room. And moving down, I've got my wall wires all as one object. I've got my floor pipes as one object. And I've got my light fixtures separated out into the wires and then the light objects themselves. And then our hologram table, I've got one object for my holo table. So I've merged all these panels into it. And of course, you can see by merging all these things together, they still retain all the materials and they're still assigned to the right objects. Now, one important thing to note is that for any object that you've unwrapped the UVs for, so for example, our room object where we've unwrapped our UVs to get the material working correctly for the baked material, you don't want to merge any of those objects with any other objects. You want to keep those on their own. So for example, if we were to merge this room with the table, then we'd have two different UV systems. Anyways, just for simplicity's sake, if you've unwrapped the UV for anything, don't merge it with anything else. Keep that object separate. Let's take all this and export it over into Unreal. Okay, and here we are with our friendly little warnings. Again, there are ways of getting rid of these, and so that we can improve this stuff so that this doesn't happen. But that's kind of beyond the scope of what we need. Again, these are warnings. They're not going to stop you from being able to have a project that works. Okay, cool. So here we are. This is a much cleaner looking project file than what we had before. And you know what? It's good enough. It's gonna work. So you can double click on any of these objects to see them. And here they all are. And of course, once again, our UVs and our light maps are all done for us. And there's a ton of overlapping UVs in these. You can see actually Unreal's done a pretty good job of separating out as many of these as possible. So some of these objects may actually work for us to have them as stationary or static. But again, we're not really planning on that for this project. So it's not really worth it. So, okay, let's grab these guys and just drag them in to our project. And then you can see they pop in right away. So again, a much more efficient way of working for us. So we can just zero out everything with all of it selected. And once again, we're in our room and we've got our stuff. Cool. All right, so let's throw in some lights again real quick. Just drop a light into the scene. And now, just like last time, what we need to do is take our lights, we're going to set them to movable, take all of our objects that we just imported, and we're going to move them off static onto stationary. And what we can do is take a look at some of these things as well and go, all right, could we make this static or not? And then we need to go ahead and go build lighting, and our lighting has been built. Great. So now our scene is functioning. It's all in place, and we can duplicate our lighting setup just by creating similar lights and placing them in similar spots as we had in Blender so that we can get a similar look. Now, what we're going to do, this is about all we've got time for today for this episode. So we've covered, the details of how to bring things over. I've introduced the idea of light maps and how that can cause problems if you're not expecting them and you don't know what they are, why they're important, and also why we're not using them in this case. And hopefully that's all made sense. Again, the ideal is to have some light maps in your scene if you're making a big scene or a big game or something with a lot of stuff going on. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. And I hope you enjoyed it. So once again, hit that like button if you were into it. And please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And that way you can find out when every episode is coming out and ring the bell to get notifications. And I'm going to try and keep releasing these once a week, and keep letting me know what you think of it all in the comments and questions below. I know there's a lot of Unreal experts out there that are way better than me. They're going to have a lot of really great points. So have a scroll through the comments as well. You'll see some other really great tips and stuff. And please help me out if there's things that you're seeing that you think, hey, you could be doing this a little bit better, or this is a better approach to this. Don't hesitate. Put it in the comments. It's actually been really helpful. I've learned a lot from the community. Everyone's been really amazing. So hope you're enjoying this scene, and stay tuned for the next episode. I will catch you in the next tutorial. See ya. Have a great week.